I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 62 years old, and 1 year ago my son-in-law tried to murder me for $2 million. But this story doesn't begin with attempted murder. It begins 3 years earlier on a sunny Sunday afternoon in Pasadena, California, when my daughter brought Eric Thornton home for the first time. I knew within 15 seconds that something was terribly wrong. Not because of Mother's intuition, but because I recognized the look in his eyes. I'd seen it before decades ago in another man's eyes. The look of someone who sees people as assets to be acquired, not human beings to be loved. I didn't say anything that day. I smiled. I served dinner. I made polite conversation. But that night I opened a leather journal my late husband Robert had given me, and I wrote one sentence: "Julia brought Eric home today. I am afraid." That was the first entry. By the time Eric was arrested, I had written 800 pages. 800 pages that would save my daughter's life. This is the story of those 3 years and how a mother's patience became her daughter's salvation. The doorbell rang at exactly 6:00 p.m. Julia was always punctual, a trait she'd inherited from her father. I wiped my hands on my apron and glanced at the lamb chops in the oven. Her favorite meal since she was 7 years old. I wanted everything to be perfect for meeting this man she'd been dating for 3 months. Through the kitchen window, I watched them walk up the driveway. Julia looked radiant in a yellow sundress, her dark hair catching the late afternoon light. The man beside her was tall, maybe 6'2", with perfectly styled dark hair and a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. But it wasn't his appearance that made my hand still on the dish towel. It was the way he touched her. His hand rested on the small of her back, but there was pressure there. Not the gentle touch of a man guiding his girlfriend, but the firm grip of someone asserting ownership. And Julia's posture, the way she walked just slightly ahead of his hand, trying to maintain space while still staying within his reach. I'd been a CPA for 35 years before I retired. I'd learned to read body language to spot the tells that numbers alone couldn't show. Right now, my daughter's body was telling me something her bright smile wasn't. "Mom!" Julia burst through the door, bringing the scent of jasmine perfume and forced enthusiasm. She hugged me tightly, and I felt her ribcage through the thin fabric of her dress. She'd lost weight. "This is Eric. Eric, this is my mom, Sarah." Eric extended his hand, and his grip was exactly what I expected. Too firm, held too long, with his other hand covering mine in that power play handshake politicians love. "Mrs. Mitchell, it's wonderful to finally meet you. Julia talks about you constantly. Please call me Sarah." I gently extracted my hand. "Come in, both of you. Dinner's almost ready." As they settled in the living room, I watched Eric's eyes move around the space. Not the casual glance of a first-time visitor, but a systematic assessment. He lingered on the antique grandfather clock in the corner, the Tiffany lamp on the side table, the original watercolor above the fireplace. I'd seen appraisers work faster. "This is a beautiful home, Sarah," he said, settling onto my sofa like he owned it. "How long have you lived here?" "Robert and I bought it in 1985, 40 years ago now." "Wow." His eyes lit up with the unmistakable gleam of calculation. "Pasadena real estate from the 80s. That must have appreciated incredibly. You're probably sitting on what, 1.2 million, maybe more." Julia's face flushed. "Eric, that's not appropriate." No, I'm just impressed." He reached over and squeezed her knee. The gesture looked affectionate, but I saw her wince. "I'm in financial consulting, Sarah. I can't help but appreciate a smart investment when I see one." I returned to the kitchen, but I could hear every word through the open doorway. "Babe, I told you my mom doesn't like talking about money." Julia said, her voice low but tense. "I was just making conversation. She understands. Don't be so sensitive." There it was, that subtle shift of blame. Don't be so sensitive. 4 words that would echo through my documentation for the next 3 years. Dinner was everything a first meeting should be on the surface. Eric complimented the food, asked questions about my career, shared funny stories about his childhood in Colorado. But underneath the charm, I saw the pattern emerging. "Julia mentioned you were a CPA," Eric said, cutting into his lamb. "That's impressive. A lot of financial knowledge. I bet you've done well with investments over the years." "I've been careful with money." I kept my answer deliberately vague. "Good life insurance. I hope everyone should have solid coverage. You never know what life throws at you." He smiled warmly, but his eyes stayed on mine, waiting for information. I'm well prepared for the future. That's smart. Julia's lucky to have such a responsible mother. She'll be well taken care of. Eventually. Eventually. The word hung in the air like a threat disguised as reassurance. Julia changed the subject quickly. Mom, Eric and I are thinking about taking a trip to Napa next month. Have you ever been? The rest of dinner passed with small talk about travel, Julia's marketing job, Eric's consulting business. But I filed away every detail. The way he ordered her to pass the salt not asked. The way he corrected her pronunciation of quinoa in front of me. The way he checked his phone 4 times during the meal each time, making Julia's shoulders tense. When they left at 8:30, Julia hugged me at the door. So what do you think? I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab her shoulders and shake her and tell her to run. But I'd seen enough intervention failures in my decades of life to know that would only push her closer to him. He seems very confident, I said carefully. He is. That's what I love about him. He knows what he wants and he goes after it. She glanced back at Eric, who was already in the driver's seat of his Tesla engine running. I should go. Love you, Mom. Love you too, sweetheart. Call me this week. I will. Promise. But as I watched them drive away, Eric's hand already on her thigh, controlling even the way she sat, I knew that promise would be broken. He would start limiting her calls, her visits, her entire world. I stood in my doorway until the taillights disappeared around the corner. Then I went inside, locked the door, and walked to my study. Robert's photograph smiled at me from the shelf taken on our honeymoon in Hawaii, when we were young and everything seemed simple. I pulled out the leather journal from my desk drawer. It was a gift from Robert 20 years ago, meant for my memoirs. I'd never written in it. Until tonight. I dated the first page October 3rd, 2021. Then I wrote Julia brought Eric home today. He asked about the house value within 10 minutes. He assessed my assets like a banker reviewing a loan application. He touched Julia like she was property he'd already acquired. She's lost weight. She apologizes when he corrects her. She watches him constantly monitoring his moods. I am afraid. Robert, if you're watching, help me protect our daughter, because I recognize what I'm seeing, and I know it only gets worse from here. I closed the journal and placed it in my desk drawer, not knowing that this was the first page of 800 that would eventually save my daughter's life. The next morning, I drove to Secure Vault Storage on East Colorado Boulevard. I'd been renting Unit 247 for 12 years, ever since Robert died. Most people assumed I kept it because I couldn't let go of his belongings. They were half right. The unit was climate-controlled 10 by 10 feet filled with carefully organized boxes. To a casual observer, it looked like the accumulated debris of a long life. Robert's winter coats, his collection of mystery novels, my mother's china, photo albums from before the digital age. But that was just the outer layer, the camouflage. I moved aside a stack of boxes labeled Christmas Decorations 1995 to 2005 and revealed a locked metal filing cabinet. Inside were the documents that truly mattered. The real reason I'd maintained this space for over a decade. I'd spent the sleepless hours after Julia and Eric left organizing my thoughts. Now I needed to organize my evidence. From my purse, I pulled out the small notebook where I'd jotted down observations during dinner. Eric's questions about insurance. His comment about Julia being taken care of eventually. The way he'd assessed my home like he was already planning to sell it. I unlocked the cabinet and pulled out the thick file labeled Julia Protection Documents. Robert and I had created these papers in the months before he died from liver cancer. He'd been lucid until the end, sharp and planning even through the pain. One night as I sat by his hospital bed, he'd grabbed my hand with surprising strength. Sarah, listen to me. I need you to promise something. Anything. Our girl is too trusting. She sees the best in people. It's one of the things I love most about her, but it makes her vulnerable. He'd coughed, and I'd held water to his lips. One day she's going to meet someone who sees that kindness and wants to exploit it. A man who sees her as a path to money, not as a person to love. Robert, she's only 19, which is why we need to prepare now, while we have time. Sarah promised me you'll protect her assets. Set up the trust. Get the prenup documents ready. Make it so that even if she marries the wrong person, our life's work stays safe. So she'll have something when she finally wakes up. I'd thought he was being paranoid. Cancer had made him anxious, worried about everything he'd be leaving behind. But I'd promised. And in the weeks before he died, Robert and I had worked with attorney Stephen Garrett to build an impenetrable fortress around Julia's future. Now looking at these documents, I understood. Robert had known this moment would come. Maybe not the specifics, but the pattern. I pulled out each document, reviewing them. The trust established 2013 funded with $800,000 from Robert's life insurance and our savings. Julia was the sole beneficiary, but the trust was structured so that no spouse could access it. Ever. Not in marriage, not in divorce, not even if Julia signed papers saying otherwise. Stephen had built-in protections that even Julia didn't fully understand. The prenuptial agreement template. Robert had insisted we prepare this before he died. At the time, Julia didn't even have a serious boyfriend, but Robert had made her sign a document agreeing that if she ever married, she would execute a prenup protecting family assets. She'd signed it thinking it was just her dying father's paranoia. She'd been 20 years old and barely read it. My life insurance policy. $2 million payable directly to the trust, not to Julia as an individual. If I died, Eric couldn't touch a penny of it. The house deed, solely in my name, not joint with Julia, not transferable without my express written consent witnessed by Stephen Garrett. My will updated 6 months ago to ensure everything passed through the trust structure. Julia would inherit everything, but she'd inherit it protected. I opened my new journal and began a fresh entry October 4th, 2021. Last night I met Eric Thornton. Today I reviewed our protective documents. Thank God Robert insisted on this. Thank God I listened. Eric asked about my insurance. He assessed my house value. He's already calculating inheritance. But what he doesn't know, he'll never see a penny of it. Even if he marries Julia. Even if something happens to me. The money is locked away where men like him can never reach it. Now I need to document everything. Build a case. So that when Julia is ready to see the truth, she'll have proof. Not just her mother's paranoid warnings, but facts, dates, evidence. I added a new section to the filing cabinet. A fresh manila folder labeled Eric Thornton, Timeline. Inside I placed my notes from last night. Then I added a new page. Observations. First meeting. Asked about house value within 10 minutes. Asked about life insurance unprompted. Used phrase. Julia will be well taken care of. Eventually. Eventually equals when I'm dead. Owns Tesla, wears expensive suit, but Julia mentioned he's between consulting jobs. Controls Julia physically hand on back knee. Squeeze both caused visible discomfort. Corrects her speech in front of others. Checked phone repeatedly during dinner, making her anxious. I would come here every week. Document everything. Build the case that Julia wasn't ready to see yet. Because I'd learned something in my 62 years, you can't save people by force. You can only prepare for them. 3 weeks after that first dinner, Julia called me. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was in my garden deadheading the roses Robert had planted. Hey, Mom, do you have time for lunch on Sunday? Of course, sweetheart. I'd love that. There was a pause. Background noise, then Eric's voice. Who are you talking to? My mom. We're planning lunch. Again, you just saw her 3 weeks ago. Eric, it's my mom. Another pause. Then Julia's voice smaller. Actually, Mom, can we do it at your house instead of going out? Eric and I are trying to save money. I kept my voice neutral. That's fine. I'll cook. After we hung up, I sat in the garden for a long time staring at Robert's roses. It was starting. The isolation. You just saw her 3 weeks ago, as if weekly visits with your mother were excessive. Sunday arrived. Julia came alone. Eric had a work emergency that materialized exactly 15 minutes before they were supposed to leave. I'm so sorry, Mom. Julia looked exhausted with dark circles under her eyes. She'd lost more weight. He's been so stressed about this new consulting contract. What kind of consulting does he do exactly? I asked, serving her my homemade chicken soup. Financial advising. He helps people manage their portfolios. She said it like she was reciting a rehearsed line. Does he have an office? He works from home mostly. It's more flexible that way. I filed that away. No verifiable employment. Red flag number 17. We ate in comfortable silence for a moment, then Julia said, Mom, I need to tell you something. Eric and I are moving in together. My spoon paused halfway to my mouth. That's a big step. I know, but we love each other and it makes financial sense. His lease is up next month, and why pay for 2 places? She wasn't meeting my eyes. Plus, he'll be there to help me with things. He's so good at managing money. He's already helped me refinance my car loan and consolidate my credit cards. Every word made my chest tighten. He was already controlling her finances. How did he consolidate your credit cards? He had me transfer the balances to a new card with a better rate. He even set up automatic payments from my checking account so I never miss a payment. So he has access to your checking account. Well, we're basically living together now, so yes, it's easier for him to manage our finances from one place. She finally looked at me, and I saw the defensiveness in her eyes. Mom, I know what you're thinking, but Eric isn't trying to control me. He's trying to help. He's good at this stuff. I took a breath. Choose your battles, Sarah. I just want to make sure you're protecting yourself, honey. From what the man I love, her voice rose. Mom, Eric told me you'd react like this. He said you'd try to make him sound bad because you don't want me to be independent. There it was. He'd already planted that seed. Any concern I expressed would now be filtered through his narrative overbearing mother can't let go. Julia, I want you to be happy. That's all I've ever wanted. Then be happy for me. She stood up, leaving her soup half-eaten. I should go. Eric will wonder where I am. You just got here. I know, but he worries when I'm gone too long. She left 20 minutes after arriving. I stood at my window and watched her drive away, and then I went to my study. October 24th, 2021. Julia came for lunch today. Alone. Eric had to work. She's moving in with him next month. He's already consolidated her credit cards and has access to her checking account. She's lost another 5 pounds. She left after 20 minutes because Eric worries. She told me Eric warned her I'd react badly to their moving in together. He's pre-programmed her response to my concerns. Classic isolation technique. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake her and tell her to run. But I can't. Not yet. She's not ready to hear it. So I'll document. And wait. And prepare. The weeks turned into months. Our Sunday lunches became less frequent. Julia always had a reason Eric wasn't feeling well. They had plans with his friends. They were saving money and didn't want to drive to Pasadena. Each time I documented it. November 7th, 2021. Julia canceled Sunday lunch. 3rd cancellation in a row. November 21st, 2021. Thanksgiving. Julia and Eric came for 2 hours. Eric criticized the turkey too dry, the stuffing too much sage. My choice of wine should have been red, not white with turkey. Julia apologized to him, then apologized to me for his honesty. December 15th, 2021. Julia called at 11 p.m. crying. Eric lost his temper because she laughed at a joke her coworker made. He threw his phone at the wall. She said he's just stressed about finding the right consulting job. She's making excuses for him. I started creating spreadsheets because that's what accountants do. We organize chaos into understandable patterns. Isolation tracker, date event. Julia's response, October 24th. Eric worries when she's gone. Leaves after 20 minutes. November 7th, 3rd, canceled Sunday lunch. Eric needs me home. November 21st. Eric criticizes my cooking. Julia apologizes for him. December 3rd. Eric says I'm too involved. Julia visits even less. December 15th. Eric throws phone during fight. Julia makes excuses. Financial control tracker. Date action control level October 24th. Access to checking account medium. November 1st. Managing her paycheck. High. November 15th. Julia asks me for $500. Critical December 10th. Eric handling all bills. Complete on December 20th. Julia came for Christmas gift exchange. She wore a turtleneck despite the 75-degree California weather. When she reached up to put a box on my shelf, the sleeve rode up. Bruises. Dark purple bruises circling her wrist like a bracelet. Julia. I caught her hand gently. What happened to your arm? She pulled away quickly. I bumped it on the car door. I'm so clumsy. Those are finger marks. Mom, please don't. Her eyes filled with tears. I just came to give you your Christmas present and have a nice afternoon. Can we not do this? Do what? Ask if you're safe. I am safe. Eric loves me. Yes, he gets frustrated sometimes, but that's because I provoke him. I need to be better at not Julia Rose Mitchell. I used her full name the way I had when she was a child caught in a lie. Listen to what you just said. You provoke him. There is no provocation that justifies leaving bruises. She grabbed her purse. I knew you wouldn't understand. Eric was right. You can't stand to see me with someone who actually cares about me. You're too used to having me all to yourself. That's not true. Isn't it? You've been critical of Eric since the day you met him. You didn't give him a chance, and now you're trying to ruin my happiness because you're lonely. The words hit like a slap, not because they were true, but because they were so clearly Eric's words coming out of Julia's mouth. She left without saying goodbye. I sat in my silent house in the chair where Robert used to read his mystery novels, and I let myself cry for exactly 10 minutes. Then I dried my eyes, went to my study, and wrote, December 20th, 2021, Julia came today. Bruises on her wrist, clear finger marks. She said she bumped the car door. When I questioned her, she said she provokes him. My daughter is learning to blame herself for his violence. She accused me of being lonely, of wanting to control her, of not wanting her to be happy. These are Eric's words. He's coached her on exactly what to say to me. She left angry. She may not come back for a while, but I took photographs. While she was in the bathroom, I photographed the bruises with my phone with timestamp. Evidence. This is escalating. The isolation has led to financial control, which has led to physical violence. Classic pattern. By my calculations, they'll be engaged within 6 months, married within a year. I need to be ready. I opened my laptop and emailed Stephen Garrett, my attorney. Stephen, I need to meet with you as soon as possible. It's about Julia and the protection documents Robert and I established. I believe we'll need to use them soon. The situation is developing exactly as Robert feared. Sarah. His response came 30 minutes later. Sarah, I have availability this Thursday at 2 p.m. Bring all documentation you've collected. If this is following the pattern I think it is, we need to ensure every protection is still in place. We'll be ready. Stephen. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed in the room I'd shared with Robert for 40 years, and I thought about my daughter, about the bright, confident girl she'd been, about the frightened woman she was becoming. And I thought about Robert's words in the hospital. Don't try to save her too soon. She won't let you. Build the safety net. Document everything. And when she's ready to jump, make sure she has somewhere safe to land. I was building that net, page by page, document by document, photograph by photograph. 300 pages down, 500 more to go. Outside my window, the moon cast silver shadows across my garden. Robert's roses had gone dormant for winter, but they'd bloom again in spring. They always did. I just had to make sure Julia survived long enough to bloom again, too. Valentine's Day 2022 fell on a Monday. Julia called me at 6:47 p.m., her voice shaking with what sounded like excitement but felt like barely contained panic. Mom, he proposed. I was in my kitchen cleaning up from a dinner I'd eaten alone. The dish slipped in my hands. What Eric proposed at Malibu Beach right at sunset. It was perfect, Mom. He had candles and everything. Look at this ring. I could hear her moving the phone trying to show me through FaceTime, but all I could see was a blur of light reflecting off diamond. That's wonderful, honey. Congratulations. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. I know you have concerns about Eric. Julia rushed on, and I could hear the defensiveness already building. But Mom, he's changing. He's been so sweet these past 2 weeks. No fights at all. He even apologized for being stressed before. He said he was scared about how much he loved me, but now he's ready to commit. 2 weeks, the honeymoon phase before tightening the noose. I'd read about this pattern in the domestic violence literature I'd been consuming. Abusers often became loving and attentive before major commitments. It reinforced the victim's hope that things were getting better, that marriage would fix everything. When are you thinking for the wedding? June, just 4 months away. I know it's fast, but Eric says why wait when you found the person you're meant to be with? She giggled, a sound that didn't quite reach authentic joy. Plus a summer wedding will be beautiful. Mom, I was hoping... Would you help me plan it? Of course I will. And Mom, I need to ask you something. Eric and I have been talking about finances, and we want to be smart about our future. He's been helping me understand my assets and plan for the long term. He asked about the trust Dad set up for me. Can you explain how that works? My hand tightened on the phone. So that was the angle. The trust is structured to protect you, honey. Your dad wanted to make sure you'd always be financially secure. But Eric says that kind of thing can be complicated in a marriage. He says we should simplify our finances, have everything joint, so we're truly partners. Can the trust be dissolved? I chose my words very carefully. The trust your father set up is irrevocable, That means it can't be changed or dissolved. It was specifically designed that way to protect you. Protect me from what? From my husband. Her voice rose. Mom, are you saying you don't trust Eric, that Dad wouldn't have trusted him? I'm saying your father wanted to make sure you'd always have security regardless of any circumstances. Circumstances? You mean divorce? You're already planning for my divorce before I'm even married. She was crying now. Eric said you'd do this. He said you'd try to make him look like he's only after money. But Mom, he loves me. Why can't you see that? Julia, I see that you love him, and I want you to be happy. No, you want me to be alone like you are. You've been alone since Dad died, and you can't stand that I'm finding happiness with someone new. The accusation pierced something in my chest. Not because it was true, but because it was so perfectly poisonously Eric. Julia, that's not... I have to go. Eric's waiting for me. We're going to celebrate. I'll call you later about wedding planning. She hung up. I stood in my kitchen phone in hand, and for a moment I allowed myself to imagine doing what every fiber of my being wanted to do: drive to their apartment, drag Julia out, lock her in my house until she saw reason. But I was 62 years old. I'd lived long enough to know that force never worked. You couldn't save someone by taking away their choices. You could only prepare for the moment they were ready to save themselves. I went to my study, pulled out the journal, and wrote, February 14th, 2022, Julia called tonight. Eric proposed. She's ecstatic. But in the same breath, she mentioned he's been asking about the trust, wants to simplify finances, wants everything joint. He's been sweet for 2 weeks textbook honeymoon phase before major commitment. She accused me of wanting her to be alone, of planning for her divorce before her marriage. These are his words. He's prepared her for this conversation. Wedding in June, 4 months away. I need to meet with Stephen, make sure the prenup triggers automatically, make sure Eric can't access anything even after marriage. The next morning, I drove to Stephen Garrett's office in downtown Los Angeles. He'd been our family attorney for 20 years, handling everything from Robert's will to Julia's trust establishment. He was 62 like me, with silver hair and kind eyes that had seen too many families torn apart by money. Sarah, he stood when his secretary showed me in. I've been expecting this call since our meeting in December. I sat down and pulled out my journal, now 150 pages thick. She's engaged. Wedding in June. He's already asking about the trust. Stephen's jaw tightened. Of course he is. Do you have documentation? I handed him the journal. He spent 30 minutes reading, his expression growing darker with each page. Finally, he looked up. Sarah, this is textbook financial abuse escalating to physical violence. The pattern is unmistakable. He tapped a page. This entry here, where she asks you for $500 because Eric is managing her paycheck, that's complete financial control. And these photos of bruises, he shook his head. This man is dangerous. I know. Have you tried to intervene directly? Every time I express concern, she defends him more strongly. He's programmed her to see my worry as controlling behavior. Stephen leaned back in his chair. Classic isolation technique. He's made himself the victim of your interference. So the more you try to help, the more you push her toward him. Exactly. Then we focus on what we can control, the legal protections. He pulled out a thick file. Let me review the documents Robert and I prepared. For the next hour, we went through everything. The trust was solid. Irrevocable, with Julia as beneficiary, but no access for spouses. Even if Julia signed documents saying otherwise, Stephen was the trustee with final authority. Eric couldn't touch it. The prenup was enforceable. Julia had signed the agreement to execute a prenup before any marriage when she was 20, and Robert was dying. She'd barely read it, thinking it was just her paranoid father's wishes. But it was legally binding. My life insurance paid directly to the trust, not to Julia individually. If I died, Eric would never see a penny. The house deed was solely in my name, with specific language preventing transfer without Stephen's witnessed approval. This is as ironclad as we can make it, Stephen said. But Sarah, there's one vulnerability. If something happens to you before the prenup is signed, before the wedding, Eric will focus all his manipulation on Julia to contest the trust. And if he makes her vulnerable enough, grieving, isolated, dependent on him, he might succeed in breaking it. My throat went dry. You're saying I'm the target. I'm saying that you're the obstacle between Eric and approximately $3 million in assets. The house, the insurance, the trust. As long as you're alive and alert, you can protect those assets. But if you were to die suddenly, he let the sentence hang. You think he'd try to kill me? Stephen met my eyes. Sarah read your own documentation. This man has isolated your daughter, taken control of her finances physically, abused her, and now he's asking about family trusts. This isn't a man who gives up when he meets obstacles. This is a man who removes them. I drove home in a daze. The California sunshine felt obscene too bright for the darkness of my thoughts. That night I called Rebecca Stone, a woman I'd met at a grief support group years ago after Robert died. We'd become friends over shared loss. She'd lost her daughter Emma 20 years earlier. I'd never asked how Emma died. Now sitting in my darkened living room, I finally asked, "Rebecca, how did Emma die?" Silence on the other end. "Then why are you asking Sarah?" "Because Julia is engaged to a man who's abusing her, and my attorney thinks I might be in danger." "Then you need to know the truth." Rebecca's voice cracked. "Emma married a man named Tom Davidson. He isolated her from me, controlled her money, beat her. And when Emma's father died and left her $500,000, Tom killed her. Made it look like she fell down the stairs. The police ruled it an accident." My hands started shaking. "Rebecca, but I knew. I'd been documenting everything just like you are. After Emma died, I found her journals. She'd been documenting too. But she waited too long to act. By the time she was ready to leave, Tom realized what she was planning. So he killed her first." "I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be smart. Sarah, if this man is asked about the trust he's already planning, men like this don't wait. They act when they see their opportunity. You need to protect yourself. Not just Julia, yourself." After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time. Then I went to my study and opened my laptop. I ordered a home security system to be installed next week. I changed my will, leaving detailed instructions about my documentation if I died suddenly. I wrote a letter to Julia, sealed it, and gave Stephen instructions to deliver it to her if I died under any circumstances he deemed suspicious. And then I updated my journal, February 15th, 2022. Talked to Stephen today. The protections are solid, but Stephen thinks I'm the obstacle between Eric and the money. He thinks Eric might try to remove me. Talked to Rebecca tonight. She finally told me how Emma died. Her son-in-law killed her for $500,000. Eric is asking about a trust worth $800,000 plus my house, $1.2 million plus my life insurance, $2 million. That's over $4 million. I'm installing security cameras tomorrow, and I'm writing this with the awareness that these pages might someday be evidence in a murder trial. Mine or Julia's. God let me live long enough to save my daughter. The security system was installed on a Tuesday. 4 cameras covering every entrance to my house, motion sensors on the windows, a panic button by my bed. The technician, a young man named Miguel, tested everything twice. "Mrs. Mitchell, you're all set. These cameras record to the cloud, so even if someone destroys the physical system, the footage is safe." He showed me the app on my phone. "You can watch live feed from anywhere, and this panic button." He pressed it, and within 90 seconds a patrol car pulled up outside. "Direct line to the police." "Thank you, Miguel." After he left, I stood in my living room looking at the small camera mounted discreetly in the corner. I'd lived in this house for 40 years without needing surveillance. Now I was installing it to protect myself from my daughter's fiancé. My phone rang. "Julia." "Mom, I'm going dress shopping this Saturday. Will you come?" The invitation surprised me. After our last conversation, I'd expected more silence. "I'd love to, honey." "Great, meet me at Bella Bride in Pasadena at 11. And Mom?" Her voice softened. "I'm sorry about what I said last week. About you being lonely. That wasn't fair." "It's okay, sweetheart." "Eric and I talked about it. He helped me see that I was stressed about the wedding, and I took it out on you. He's actually excited for you to be involved in the planning. He says family is important." Every word she spoke sounded rehearsed. Eric helped her see. Eric was excited for my involvement. Eric controlled even her apologies now. "I'll see you Saturday," I said. After hanging up, I immediately called Rebecca. "He's changed tactics. Now he's encouraging Julia to involve me in wedding planning." "Of course he is," Rebecca said. "Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. He wants to monitor your influence, make sure you're not planning anything. Sarah, be very careful. Men like this are most dangerous when they're pretending to be cooperative." Saturday morning, I arrived at Bella Bride to find Julia already there, flipping through magazines. She looked thin, almost fragile in her jeans and oversized sweater. It was 80 degrees outside. "Mom!" She hugged me, and I felt every rib. "Thank you for coming. I know things have been tense. Honey, you're my daughter. I'll always be here for you." We spent 2 hours looking at dresses. Julia tried on 7 different styles, and with each one she pulled out her phone to send photos to Eric. Each time she waited anxiously for his response before deciding. "What do you think of this one?" she asked, wearing a beautiful A-line dress with delicate lace sleeves. "You look stunning." Her phone buzzed. She read the message and her face fell. "Eric says it makes me look washed out. Too much white on white with my pale skin." "Julia, it's your wedding dress. What do you think?" I think Eric's right. He has a good eye for these things." She was already taking it off. The consultant, a woman in her 50s named Patricia, caught my eye. I saw recognition there. She'd seen this before. The bride who couldn't make a decision without consulting someone who wasn't even present. Finally, Julia chose a dress. Not the one she'd smiled brightest in, but the one Eric had approved via text. A form-fitting mermaid style that frankly looked uncomfortable and unlike Julia entirely. "Perfect," Julia said, staring at herself in the mirror with an expression that wasn't quite happiness. "Eric will love this." At lunch afterward, Julia picked at a salad while I tried to find an opening for a real conversation. "How are the wedding plans coming otherwise?" "Good. Eric's handling most of it. He found this great venue in Malibu Calamigos Ranch. It's beautiful, but expensive. That's actually why I wanted to talk to you." She put down her fork. "Mom, you know I love you and appreciate everything you've done for me. And I know weddings are traditionally paid for by the bride's family." My chest tightened. "How much does Eric want?" "It's not Eric wanting anything. We want to have a beautiful wedding. And the venue, catering, flowers, photographer. It's all adding up to about $65,000. I kept my face neutral. "That's quite expensive for a 4-month engagement." "I know, but Mom, you can afford it. You always said you'd been careful with money. And Dad would have wanted this for me, wouldn't he?" His only daughter's wedding. She was right. Robert would have wanted Julia to have a beautiful wedding, but he wouldn't have wanted her marrying Eric. "Let me think about it, honey." Her face fell. "What's there to think about unless—" "Eric said you might do this. He said you might use money to try to control my decisions." "Julia, that's not Mom. Isn't it Dad left me that trust, but you and that lawyer control it? I can't even access my own money without approval, and now I'm asking for help with my wedding, and you need to think about it." She stood up, leaving her salad mostly untouched. "I thought you'd be happy for me. I thought you'd want to help. But Eric was right. You can't stand seeing me independent and happy." She left before I could respond. I sat alone at the cafe table watching her drive away in a car I hadn't seen before. A new BMW. I wondered where Eric had gotten the money for that. That evening I drove to the storage unit. I needed to add to my documentation, but I also needed the comfort of this space. This fortress I'd built to protect my daughter. I unlocked Unit 247 and stepped inside. The familiar smell of cardboard and preservation greeted me. I moved past Robert's belongings to the filing cabinet and pulled out my journal. March 20th, 2022. Wedding dress shopping today. Julia couldn't choose a dress without Eric's approval via text. She chose the dress he liked, not the one she liked. She asked me to pay for the wedding $65,000. When I hesitated, she accused me of using money to control her. Eric's words again. "She's driving a new BMW. Neither she nor Eric have jobs that could afford that car. Where is the money coming from? Note hire Thomas Wright again. Get Eric's full financial background." I added photos I'd taken surreptitiously of Julia, the visible weight loss, the way she hunched her shoulders, the constant phone checking. Then I did something new. I pulled out a separate notebook and started mapping Eric's likely strategy. Eric's probable plan 1. Marry Julia June 2022, check 2. Isolate her completely from me, check mark already in progress 3. Gain access to trust, blocked by Stephen 4. If trust access fails, push for me to gift money directly, 5. If gifts fail, what divorce? No divorce gives him nothing with the prenup. 6. His only path to real money. My death. Life insurance, $2 million to trust. House, $1.2 million to Julia through trust. Savings, $400,000 to Julia through trust. Total $3.6 million he wants to access through Julia vulnerability points. If I die before prenup is signed, Julia might contest trust in her grief. If I die and Eric controls Julia emotionally, he could manipulate her into breaking protections. If I die, accidentally, investigation might be minimal, protection strategy. Ensure prenup is signed before wedding have Stephen present it. Document Eric's financial desperation as motive. Make my suspicions known to police, now create paper trail. Make it impossible for my death to look accidental. I was writing the last line when my phone rang. Private Investigator Thomas Wright. Mrs. Mitchell, I have that information you requested on Eric Thornton. Go ahead. It's not good. Eric Thornton isn't even his real name. He was born Eric Davidson in Colorado. Changed his name legally in 2019. Before that, he had another name change in 2015, Eric Morrison. My hand froze. He's changed his name twice. 3 times total. His birth name was Eric Davidson. The name changes correspond with moving to new states, Colorado to Arizona to Nevada to California, each time about 2 years after a wealthy older woman in the area died under questionable circumstances. The room tilted. What ye? I'm sending you the file now. But Mrs. Mitchell, this is what I found in Colorado, 2014. A woman named Patricia Morrison died from a fall downstairs. Her daughter had recently married a man named Eric Morrison. That daughter was declared mentally unfit to contest the will, and Eric Morrison disappeared with approximately $200,000. In Arizona 2017, a woman named Abigail died of a sudden heart attack. Her daughter had been dating a man named Eric Thornton. After the death, the daughter suffered what was termed a mental breakdown and was institutionalized. Eric Thornton disappeared. In Nevada 2019, a woman named Dorothy Singh died in a car accident. She'd recently changed her will to leave everything to her daughter, who was engaged to Eric Thornton. I finished. Yes, that daughter, Priya Singh, is currently in a psychiatric facility in Las Vegas. She's been there since her mother's death. And Mrs. Mitchell, all 3 of these deaths were investigated. None were ruled homicides, but the pattern is unmistakable. My voice sounded distant to my own ears. He's done this before, multiple times. And he's refined his technique. Each time the woman's death looks more natural. Each time the daughter ends up psychologically destroyed and unable to contest anything. Mrs. Mitchell, you need to go to the police with this. Now. After we hung up, I sat in the storage unit for a long time, Thomas's file open on my laptop. Photos of 3 women. Patricia Morrison, 67, died 2014. Abigail, 71, died 2017. Dorothy Singh, 68, died 2019. All of them around my age. All of them with daughters who'd been dating or married to Eric. All of them dead within a year of Eric entering their lives. I looked at the photos of their daughters. Patricia's daughter Annie stared blankly at the camera from a nursing home. Margaret's daughter Carol had the hollow eyes of someone on heavy medication. Priya Singh looked catatonic in her hospital photo. Eric hadn't just killed their mothers. He'd destroyed them psychologically so completely that they couldn't fight him. I thought about Julia, about how she was already halfway there, isolated, financially controlled, blaming herself for his abuse. I opened my journal and wrote, March 21st, 2022, Thomas found Eric's history. He's done this 3 times before. 3 women dead. 3 daughters destroyed. This isn't a man making mistakes or losing control. This is a predator with a refined system. I am his 4th target. Julia will be his 4th psychologically destroyed daughter. Unless I stop him. Tomorrow, police. I'm taking everything to Detective Kingston at LAPD. I'm making my suspicions official. Because if I die now, I want there to be no question about who did it and why. Detective Robert Kingston was younger than I expected, maybe 45, with graying temples and tired eyes that had seen too much. I'd called ahead, explained I had information about a potential threat, and he'd agreed to meet me at the West Los Angeles station. Mrs. Mitchell? He shook my hand and gestured to a chair in his small office. You said this was about your son-in-law. Future son-in-law. They're getting married in June. I placed my journal on his desk along with Thomas Wright's investigation file. Detective Kingston, I believe Eric Thornton is planning to kill me, and I believe he's done it before. For the next 2 hours, I walked him through everything. The journal documentation, Eric's pattern of abuse toward Julia, his questioning about my assets, and finally Thomas's discovery of 3 previous deaths. Detective Kingston's expression grew progressively darker as he read. He made notes, took copies of everything, and finally leaned back in his chair. Mrs. Mitchell, this is extensive. You've documented this like you were building a legal case. I was a CPA for 35 years. I document everything. I can see that. He tapped the journal. And these deaths in Colorado, Arizona, and Nevada. Your PI found connections. The same pattern. Wealthy mother, vulnerable daughter. Eric enters the picture. Mother dies within a year. Daughter is left psychologically incapable of contesting anything. But none were ruled homicides. No, each one looked like an accident or natural causes. Falls, heart attacks, car accidents. But detective 3 times. The same pattern 3 times. Kingston rubbed his temples. You're right. The pattern is suspicious. But here's my problem. I can't arrest someone for a pattern. I need evidence of an actual crime or a credible imminent threat. He's asked about my life insurance. He's isolated my daughter. He's positioning himself exactly as he did with 3 women who are now dead. Isn't that enough? For investigation, yes. For arrest number, he leaned forward. But here's what I can do. I can open a file. I can document your concerns officially. If anything happens to you, anything at all, this file will be the first thing homicide detectives see. No one will rule your death accidental with this documentation on record. That's comforting, I said dryly. I'll be dead, but at least Eric will be investigated. Kingston's expression softened. Mrs. Mitchell, I understand your frustration. But right now, Eric Thornton hasn't committed any crime in California that I can prove. Your daughter is an adult making her own choices. The financial control is concerning, but not illegal if she's consenting. The bruises you photographed are months old. Without Julia filing a complaint, I can't act on domestic violence. So I have to wait until he actually tries to kill me. I'm saying that I need more than a pattern and suspicions, but I'm also saying this: I believe you. I've been working domestic violence cases for 15 years, and I recognize what you're describing. So here's my advice. Get a restraining order. On what grounds he hasn't threatened me directly? Then create grounds. Document every interaction. If he says anything remotely threatening, you call me immediately. We build a case for harassment. And Mrs. Mitchell, he slid a card across the desk with a number written on the back. That's my personal cell phone. If you ever feel you're in immediate danger, you call me. Not 911, me. I'll be there in 20 minutes or less. I took the card. It wasn't the arrest I'd wanted, but it was something. Thank you, detective. One more thing. He handed me back the journal. Keep documenting. Everything. Because when, not if when, Eric makes his move, this journal will be the evidence that puts him away. I left the police station feeling simultaneously relieved and terrified. My suspicions were now official. If I died, Eric would be investigated. But that didn't stop him from killing me. That evening I called a family meeting. Just Julia and me at a neutral location, a coffee shop in downtown Pasadena. I needed to try one more time to reach her armed now with Thomas's investigation. Julia arrived 15 minutes late, looking anxious. Mom, I can't stay long. Eric is expecting me home by 7. We ordered coffee and I pulled out a folder. Honey, I need to show you something. It's about Eric's past. Her face closed off immediately. Mom, please don't start. Just look at this. Please. I slid Thomas's investigation across the table. She glanced at the first page, Eric's name changes, and pushed it back. I know about the name changes. Eric told me all about this. His father was abusive. He changed his name to escape that history. It's traumatic for him, and you're using it to make him look bad. Julia, did he tell you about Patricia Morrison or Abigail or Dorothy Singh? Who? 3 women whose daughters dated Eric. 3 women who died under suspicious circumstances. 3 daughters who are now in psychiatric care. Julia stood up her chair, scraping loudly. People turned to look. I'm not listening to this. You hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on my fiancé. What's wrong with you? I'm trying to protect you. No, you're trying to control me. Eric said you'd do something like this. He said you'd make up lies because you can't accept that I'm getting married. She was crying now, mascara running down her 2 thin cheeks. I came here hoping we could have a nice conversation about the wedding. Instead, you ambush me with conspiracy theories. Julia, please just read the file. No, I'm done, Mom. I'm done trying to include you in my life when all you do is attack the man I love. Eric was right about everything. You are trying to sabotage my happiness because you're alone and bitter." She grabbed her purse and left, nearly running out of the coffee shop. I sat alone with Thomas's investigation folder, 2 untouched coffees cooling on the table, and the stares of strangers who'd witnessed the scene. I'd tried. God knows I'd tried. But Eric had prepared Julia for this moment. He'd known I'd eventually dig into his past, and he'd already framed it as my controlling behavior. I gathered my papers and left. In my car, I allowed myself exactly 5 minutes to cry. Then I called Rebecca. "It didn't work," I said. I showed her Eric's history. She said he'd already told her about it, framed it as escaping an abusive father. Of course he did. "Sarah, you need to accept something. You can't save Julia by convincing her. She's too deep in the fog. The only way forward is to make yourself unsavable as a target, and wait for Eric to show his true face in a way Julia can't deny." "What do you mean, unsavable as a target?" "You make it impossible for him to kill you without being caught. You make it so obvious that you suspect him that if anything happens to you, he's immediately the prime suspect. You remove the element that makes his previous murders work the appearance of accident or natural causes." Rebecca was right. I couldn't save Julia by reasoning with her, but I could save both of us by making myself too dangerous to kill. That night, I wrote an extensive letter detailing everything I knew about Eric Thornton. I made 5 copies. One went to Stephen Garrett with instructions to open it if I died or became incapacitated. One went to Detective Kingston. One went to Rebecca. One went in my safety deposit box at the bank. And one stayed in my storage unit. The letter ended with, "If you are reading this, I am dead or unable to speak for myself. Eric Thornton killed me. He has done this before to 3 other women. Do not let him do it again. Protect my daughter Julia. She is his ultimate victim, not me. I was just an obstacle." 2 weeks before the wedding, Stephen Garrett called me. "Sarah, we need to implement the prenup now. If we wait until the day before the wedding, Eric will have time to manipulate Julia into refusing to sign." "When?" "This afternoon. I've prepared all the documents. Julia signed the agreement to execute a prenup when Robert was dying, so legally she's obligated. But Eric doesn't know about that agreement. When we present it, he's going to explode." "Good. I want to see his real face. And I want Julia to see it too." We scheduled an emergency meeting at Stephen's office, telling Julia it was about finalizing wedding details and trust paperwork. She arrived with Eric, both of them dressed casually, expecting a quick administrative meeting. Stephen's conference room was deliberately formal mahogany table leather chairs, wall of law books, a setting designed to communicate seriousness. "Julia, Eric, thank you for coming." Stephen gestured to chairs. "We have some documents that need to be signed before the wedding." "Of course." Julia smiled nervously. "What kind of documents?" Stephen slid a thick packet across the table. "A prenuptial agreement." The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Eric's face, which had been pleasant and relaxed, transformed. His jaw tightened. His eyes went cold. "Excuse me. A prenuptial agreement protecting the family trust and assets that Julia will inherit from her mother." "We're not signing that." Eric's voice was flat dangerous. Julia looked between them, confused. "Wait, I don't understand. Why do we need a prenup?" "Because, honey," I said gently, "your father and I set up protections for your inheritance. This prenup ensures that the assets we built stay protected." "Protected from what?" Julia asked. "From Eric, Mom. Are you serious right now?" "Julia," Stephen interjected, "when your father was dying, he made you sign an agreement stating that you would execute a prenup before any marriage. Do you remember that?" Julia's face went pale. That was 8 years ago. I was barely 20 years old. Dad was dying. He was paranoid about everything." "He was protecting you," I said. Eric slammed his hand on the table, making Julia jump. "This is bullshit. You're trying to trap us. Julia, we don't have to sign anything. This is your mother trying to control you from beyond the grave with your father's paranoid delusions." "Eric, calm down," Julia said, but her voice shook. "Calm down. Your mother has been plotting against us this entire time. The trust she won't let you access. The money she won't give you for the wedding. Now this, she's trying to make sure that even in marriage, you're not truly independent. That you're always under her thumb." "That's not," Julia started. "Isn't it?" Eric turned to her, and I saw the full force of his manipulation. "Baby, think about it. Your dad dies, and suddenly you have all this money you can't touch. Your mom retires and has this huge house, but she won't help us buy a home. Now 2 weeks before our wedding, They spring a prenup on us. They want to make sure that in our marriage you have money and I have nothing, that I'm dependent on you, that I'm powerless. That's not what this is, Stephen said firmly. The prenup simply states that assets Julia inherited or will inherit from her parents remain separate property. It doesn't affect anything you and Julia build together. We're not signing it. Eric stood. Julia, let's go. Julia can't go, Stephen said calmly. She's legally obligated by the agreement she signed with her father. If she refuses to sign the prenup, she forfeits her inheritance entirely. Julia looked like she'd been slapped. What day? Your father's will was very specific. You inherit only if you protect those assets through a prenuptial agreement in any marriage. He wanted to ensure his life's work couldn't be exploited. Exploited by who? Julia's voice rose. By my husband, by the man I love. Dad didn't even know Eric. How could he protect me from someone he never met? He was protecting you from anyone who might love your money more than they love you, I said quietly. Eric grabbed Julia's arm, yanking her toward the door. We're leaving. You can keep your money, Sarah. Julia doesn't need it. She doesn't need you. Eric, wait. Julia was crying now. I can't just forfeit everything Dad left me. Why not unless you believe your mother? Unless you think I'm some gold digger? His face was inches from hers now, and I saw it. The real Eric. The cold, calculating predator beneath the charming mask. Is that what you think, Julia, that I'm only with you for money? No, I don't want to lose my inheritance. That's not wrong. Then sign their fucking prenup. He shoved her back toward the table. Not hard enough to be obvious abuse, but hard enough for her to stumble. Sign it and let's get out of here. Julia sat down, hands shaking, and picked up the pen. I'm sorry, she whispered. To Eric or to me, I couldn't tell. She signed. 12 pages initialing each section, her signature getting shakier with each page. When she finished, Eric snatched his copy and stalked toward the door. 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, she's my wife, and you lose all access to her. I'll make sure of that, Sarah. You'll never see your daughter again. They left. Stephen and I sat in the silence of his conference room. Well, Stephen finally said, we got the prenup signed. Yes. My voice felt hollow. And I just lost my daughter completely. Sarah, you saved her inheritance. When this marriage ends, and it will end, Julia will have something to fall back on. If she survives that long. I drove home in a fog. When I pulled into my driveway, I saw it immediately spray paint on my garage door. Controlling bitch. My security cameras had caught everything. Eric at 3 a.m. that morning, spray painting my garage. His face clear on camera. His license plate visible. I called Detective Kingston. I have evidence of vandalism and harassment. He arrived 30 minutes later, reviewed the footage, and took a report. This is good, Sarah. It's escalation. It shows he's losing control. I can bring him in for questioning. Will that help? It creates a record. It shows pattern of behavior. If anything happens to you, this video shows premeditation. He's making mistakes now, acting on emotion. That's when we catch them. That night, I sat in my darkened living room looking at the photo of Robert on the mantel. I did what you asked, I whispered to him. I got her to sign the prenup. I protected the money. But Robert, I'm losing her. And I'm so tired. I'm so tired of fighting alone. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You won. She signed your precious prenup, but you just lost your daughter forever. After the wedding, Julia won't even remember your name. And when you die alone, and you will die, I'll make sure she doesn't even come to your funeral. I forwarded the text to Kingston immediately. His response, save that. Screenshot it. That's a threat. I'm building the case. I opened my journal and wrote May 25th, 2022, prenup signed today. Eric showed his real face. Julia saw it but still defended him. He vandalized my house. The cameras caught everything. He texted me a direct threat. Detective Kingston says he's building a case. But a case takes time. The wedding is in 2 weeks. And I have a terrible feeling that Eric isn't going to wait much longer. June 15th, 2022 dawned clear and beautiful, the kind of perfect Southern California day that belonged on postcards. I'd barely slept. Every sound in my house triggered the panic alarm in my chest, even though my security system showed nothing but the occasional cat walking across my yard. Julia hadn't spoken to me since the prenup signing 3 weeks ago. My invitation to the wedding had arrived via email, no personal note, just a formal digital invitation sent to a list of guests. I dressed carefully in a lavender silk dress, the one Robert had always loved. "If I'm going to lose my daughter today," I said to his photo, "I'm going to do it looking dignified." Calamigos Ranch in Malibu was stunning. Rolling hills, elegant Spanish architecture gardens in full bloom. The kind of venue that cost $20,000 just for the space. I wondered again where Eric had found the money. I arrived early hoping to see Julia before the ceremony, but she was sequestered in the bridal suite, and when I tried to go to her Eric's brother, a man I'd never met, blocked my path. "Family only," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm her mother." "Eric's orders. Julia doesn't want to see you until the ceremony." I found my seat in the third row, not the front where the mother of the bride traditionally sat. That seat was occupied by Eric's mother, a cold-looking woman with the same calculating eyes as her son. The ceremony began. Julia walked down the aisle alone, no one to give her away since Robert was gone, and she'd apparently decided I didn't deserve the honor. She looked beautiful in the mermaid dress Eric had chosen. She also looked terrified. The officiant began, "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." I watched my daughter promise herself to a man who planned to isolate her control, her, and eventually, when I was dead and no longer an obstacle, destroy her psychologically to access her inheritance. When the officiant said, "If anyone objects to this union, speak now or forever hold your peace," I felt every eye in the room turn toward me. I stayed silent, because objecting would only make things worse. Eric would use it as proof of my interference. Julia would hate me more, and it wouldn't stop the wedding anyway. "I now pronounce you husband and wife." And just like that, it was done. At the reception, I watched Eric maintain his charming mask. He danced with Julia. He laughed with guests. He gave a toast about how lucky he was to find such a wonderful woman. But I caught him watching me throughout the evening, his eyes cold and calculating. When he raised his glass to toast, he turned directly toward me. "And special thanks to Sarah for eventually accepting our union. I know it's hard for mothers to let go of their daughters, but Sarah, I promise you I'll take care of Julia exactly as Robert would have wanted. She'll never want for anything." The emphasis on "never want for anything" sent chills down my spine. He was talking about my death, making it sound like a joke in front of 100 witnesses. I left the reception early. I couldn't watch anymore. In my car, finally alone, I allowed myself to break. 10 minutes of gut-wrenching sobs. Then I dried my eyes, fixed my makeup, and drove home. My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. "Rebecca, how was it?" "Awful. She married him. It's done." "Then the real battle begins. Sarah, are you ready?" "Ready for what?" "For Eric to make his move. You're now the only obstacle between him and billions in assets. He's going to act soon. Maybe not tomorrow or next week, but soon. You need to be ready." "I'm as ready as I can be." That night I updated my journal. June 15th, 2022. Julia married Eric today. She didn't speak to me. I sat in the third row. She walked down the aisle alone. Eric's toast included a veiled reference to my death. "She'll never want for anything once I'm gone." The wedding itself was beautiful. My daughter looked like a prisoner at her own execution. But it's done. She's married him. And now we wait to see what Eric does next. Days until I expect him to act unknown. Pages in this journal, 487. I'm adding every day now, because Rebecca is right. Eric will make his move. And when he does, this journal will be the evidence that convicts him. I just have to survive long enough to see justice done. Julia and Eric went to Hawaii for their honeymoon, a 10-day trip I later learned was charged entirely to Julia's credit card. She texted me once from Maui, "I'm married, Mom. I wish you could be happy for me." I'd responded, "I am happy. You're happy, sweetheart. I love you." She hadn't replied. They returned on June 28th. I knew because Eric called me that afternoon, the first time he'd contacted me directly since the wedding. "Sarah, we need to talk about Julia's financial future." "What about it?" "She's my wife now. We should have joint access to everything, her accounts, the trust, all of it. I've been looking at her finances, and the way things are set up is inefficient. Too many separate accounts, too much money locked away where we can't use it. The trust is structured the way Robert wanted it, to protect Julia." "Protect her from what?" "From her own husband." His voice hardened. "Sarah, let me be clear. Julia and I are a partnership now. What's hers is mine. and I won't have you standing between us with your paranoid control games. Eric, the law is very clear. Community property laws in California don't override trust structures. Julia's inheritance is separate property. That was the whole point of the prenup you signed. I was coerced into signing that prenup. My lawyer says it might not even be enforceable. My chest tightened. You have a lawyer looking at the prenup? Of course I do. I'm protecting my wife's interests. And mine. Did you really think I'd just accept being married to someone whose mother controls all the money? I don't control anything. Stephen Garrett is the trustee. It's all legal. And Stephen Garrett is your lawyer. He does what you tell him. But Sarah... His voice dropped to something cold and dangerous. I did some research while we were in Hawaii. I found out about your little investigation. The PI you hired. The files you compiled on me. That's harassment. That's defamation. My lawyer says I could sue you. Your lawyer can try. Or we could settle this a different way. You could acknowledge that Julia is an adult capable of making her own decisions about her money. You could step back and let us live our lives. And in exchange, I won't pursue legal action against you for the damage you've tried to do to my reputation. Is Julia there? Can I speak to her? She's resting. The honeymoon wore her out. But when she's feeling better, we'll all have dinner. Discuss this like adults. How's Friday night your house? He hung up before I could respond. I immediately called Detective Kingston. Eric just called. He threatened to sue me, then invited himself to dinner at my house. It feels like a setup. What kind of setup? I don't know, but he's never asked to come to my house before. He usually keeps Julia away from me. Now suddenly he wants to have dinner here. Did he specify a time Friday night, 3 days from now? Okay, here's what we do. I'll have an unmarked car on your street that night. You keep your phone on you at all times. And Sarah, if anything feels wrong, you get out of that house. Don't be a hero. Just get out and call me. You think he's going to try something? I think Eric Thornton is escalating. The vandalism, the threatening text, now this. He's moving toward something. I just don't know what yet. The next 3 days were agonizing. I prepared my house like I was preparing for battle, made sure all security cameras were working, charged my phone fully, left copies of my journal with Rebecca Stephen and in my safety deposit box with notes about Eric's dinner invitation. I even wrote a letter, sealed it, and gave it to Rebecca. If anything happens to me on June 30th, Eric Thornton did it. Friday arrived too quickly. At 5:00 p.m., Julia and Eric pulled up in Julia's BMW. I watched through my camera as Eric put his hand on Julia's back, guiding her to my door. Or controlling her. It was hard to tell the difference anymore. I opened the door. Hi, sweetheart. Julia looked thin, almost fragile. Her skin had a grayish tint and her eyes were ringed with dark circles. Hi, Mom. She hugged me, and I felt how much weight she'd lost. Eric stood behind her smiling, but his eyes were assessing my house like he'd never seen it before, or like he was planning something. Come in, I said. Dinner's almost ready. I'd made Julia's favorite, my chicken pot pie. As we ate, the conversation was stilted, full of dangerous silences. Eric asked questions about my house, my insurance, my health. Normal questions that felt sinister coming from him. So Sarah, Eric said, cutting into his pot pie. Julia tells me you've been having some health issues, high blood pressure. I hadn't told Julia about any health issues. I'm fine, just the usual aches and pains of getting older. Still at your age, you should probably update your will. Make sure everything's in order. You never know what could happen. My will is updated. Stephen handles everything. Right, Stephen Garrett. Your lawyer. Eric's smile didn't reach his eyes. Julia's lawyer too, technically, since he controls her trust. Must be convenient having one lawyer handle everything in the family. No outside oversight. Stephen is the most ethical attorney I know. I'm sure he is. Still, Julia and I were thinking once we're more settled, maybe we should get our own lawyer. Someone who represents our interests as a married couple, not just your interests in controlling Julia's inheritance. Julia shifted uncomfortably. Eric, we talked about not doing this tonight. We're just having a conversation, honey. He patted her hand. Your mom and I are getting to know each other better. That's good, right, Sarah? I suppose. After dinner, Eric excused himself to use the bathroom. The moment he left the room, I grabbed Julia's hand. Sweetheart, are you okay? You look so thin. I'm fine, Mom, just adjusting to married life. Julia, if you ever need help, if you ever need to leave. Why would I need to leave? I'm happy. but her eyes filled with tears. "I'm happy, Mom. I married the man I love. Why can't you just accept that?" "Because I don't think you're safe," Eric returned before I could finish. "Everything okay in here?" "Fine," Julia said quickly, pulling her hand away from mine. "Mom was just asking about the honeymoon." The rest of the evening was excruciating. Eric dominated every conversation, subtly insulting me while maintaining a veneer of politeness. Julia sat between us, growing smaller and quieter with each exchange. They left at 9 p.m. As they walked to their car, I watched through my camera as Eric put his hand on Julia's neck, not quite choking, but close, asserting dominance, reminding her who was in control. After they left, I checked every door, every window. Then I sat down and wrote June 30th, 2022. Eric and Julia came for dinner tonight. It was a performance. Eric was assessing my house, asking about my health, my will, my arrangements with Stephen. He's planning something. I can feel it. Julia looked sick, thin, scared. She started to tell me something when Eric left the room, but he came back too quickly. I think she's ready to ask for help, but she's not quite there yet, and I'm running out of time. Pages in Journal 531. 2 days later, my doorbell rang at 11 p.m. I checked my security camera and gasped. Julia stood on my doorstep, shaking mascara running down her face. Her right eye was swollen. Blood trickled from her split lip. I threw open the door. "Oh my God, Julia!" "Mom!" She collapsed into my arms. "Mom, help me. Please help me." I pulled Julia inside and locked the door behind us. Her entire body shook as I guided her to the couch. In the light, I could see the full extent of the damaged, swollen eye already turning purple, split lip, still bleeding finger-shaped bruises on both arms, and the way she held her ribs told me there was more damage hidden beneath her clothes. "Sweetheart, I need to call the police." "No!" She grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "Mom, please, not yet. I need a minute. I need to think." I got ice wrapped in a clean towel and gently pressed it to her eye. She winced, but didn't pull away. For several minutes we sat in silence. Finally she spoke. "You were right. About everything. I'm so stupid." "You are not stupid. You were manipulated by someone very skilled at manipulation." "I should have listened to you." Tears streamed down her face, mixing with the blood from her lip. "That first dinner when you got that look on your face. I saw it. I knew you were worried. But Eric told me you were just jealous that you couldn't stand to see me happy, and I believed him." "What happened tonight, Julia?" She took a shaky breath. "We were at the apartment. Eric was drinking. He's been drinking a lot since we got back from Hawaii. He was on his laptop looking at something, and I asked what he was working on. He got angry, said I was nosy, that I didn't trust him. I tried to walk away, and he—" She touched her eye gingerly. "He's never hit me in the face before. Always places I could hide. But tonight he didn't care." My hands clenched into fists. "What was he looking at on his laptop?" "I don't know, but Mom, I saw your name on the screen and some kind of article about making something look like an accident." The room tilted. "He was researching how to kill me." "I think so. And when I asked about it, that's when he lost control. He said—" Her voice broke. "He said you were the reason we couldn't access my money, that once you were gone, everything would be easier. Mom, I think he's planning to hurt you." I pulled out my phone. "Julia, I need to call Detective Kingston, right now." This time she didn't argue. Detective Kingston arrived in 15 minutes, along with a female officer named Amanda Rodriguez. They photographed Julia's injuries, took her statement, and called paramedics to take her to the hospital for a full examination. "Mrs. Thornton," Kingston said gently, "with these photos and your statement, we can arrest Eric tonight. But I need you to be clear. Are you willing to press charges?" Julia looked at me, then back at Kingston. "What happens if I do?" "We arrest him for domestic violence, assault, and battery. With your testimony and these injuries, he'll be held without bail, given the severity. We'll also get an emergency restraining order. He won't be able to contact you or come within 100 yards of you or your mother." "And if I don't press charges?" "He gets away with it, and he'll do it again. Probably worse next time." Julia's hand found mine. "If I press charges, will you be safe, Mom?" "Sweetheart, worry about yourself." "No, will you be safe?" "Because Eric said that if I ever tried to leave, if I ever went to the police, he'd make sure I lost everything, starting with you." Kingston leaned forward. Mrs. Thornton, Eric Thornton is not some criminal mastermind. He's a coward who hits women and preys on vulnerable people. We know his history. We know he's done this before, and we're not going to let him hurt either of you. But I need you to be brave and press charges. Julia looked at me for a long moment. Then she nodded. Okay, I'll press charges. Good. Officer Rodriguez will take you to the hospital. Get checked out, get everything documented. I'm going to arrest Eric Thornton tonight. After they left, Kingston turned to me. Sarah, I need that journal. All 531 pages. It's time to use it. I drove to the storage unit at midnight with Detective Kingston following in his unmarked car. The facility was eerily quiet, our footsteps echoing as we walked to Unit 247. This is where you've been keeping everything, Kingston asked as I unlocked the door. For 12 years, since my husband died. I showed him the filing cabinet, the journal, the photographs, the financial records, Thomas Wright's investigation, the trust documents, 3 years of my life documented and preserved. Kingston spent an hour reviewing everything, taking photos, making notes. Finally, he looked up at me with something like awe. Mrs. Mitchell, this is the most comprehensive documentation of predatory behavior I've ever seen. With Julia's testimony and this evidence, we don't just have assault charges. We have conspiracy to commit murder, pattern of behavior, prior bad acts across multiple states. Will it be enough to keep him locked up? It'll be enough to put him away for 20 years. Maybe more if we can connect him to those 3 deaths. He carefully loaded everything into evidence boxes. I'm going to pick up Eric Thornton now. You should stay here, stay safe. Don't go home until I call you. I want to be there when you arrest him. Sarah. Detective, I've spent 3 years preparing for this moment. I need to see it through. He studied my face, then nodded. Okay, but you stay in the car. If things go sideways, you leave immediately. Understood? We drove to the apartment Julia and Eric shared, a modern building in Santa Monica. It was 2 a.m. Kingston had called for backup. 3 patrol cars waited around the corner. Here's how this works, Kingston explained. We knock, announce ourselves, and arrest him. If he resists, we're prepared for that. If he runs, we have officers covering all exits. This is routine. But as we approached the apartment, something felt wrong. The door was slightly open, kitchen light spilling into the hallway. Kingston drew his weapon. Stay back, Sarah. He pushed the door open. LAPD Eric Thornton, we have a warrant for your arrest. Silence. They cleared the apartment room by room. Empty. But what they found made my blood run cold. Eric's laptop was open on the kitchen table screen, still glowing. On it, a detailed article about undetectable poisons. Another tab open to a life insurance claim process. A third tab showing my daily routine. Someone had been watching my house, documenting when I left, when I returned, when I was most vulnerable. And on the counter, a syringe, a small vial of clear liquid. Kingston called for a forensics team. He was ready to act, probably tonight or tomorrow. Sarah, if Julia hadn't run when she did, I'd be dead. Yes, an APB went out for Eric Thornton. His photo was sent to every police station in California. His car description, his known associates, everything. Kingston drove me to a hotel. You can't go home, not until we have him in custody. He's desperate now, and desperate men are dangerous. I sat in that hotel room as dawn broke over Los Angeles, watching the news report about a manhunt for a domestic violence suspect. They showed Eric's photo, listed him as armed and dangerous. My phone rang. Julia from the hospital. Mom, they're saying on the news that Eric ran, that they're looking for him. I know, honey. Mom, I'm scared. What if he comes after me, after you? The police are protecting both of us. You're safe at the hospital. I'm in a hotel. He won't find us. But what if— Julia, listen to me. For 3 years I prepared for this. I documented everything. I built a case. I protected your inheritance. I made sure that no matter what Eric did, he would fail. He's going to be caught. And you're going to be free. She was quiet for a moment. Mom, I'm so sorry. For everything I said, for not believing you. No apologies needed. You're safe. That's all that matters. Eric Thornton was caught 36 hours later trying to board a flight to Mexico using a fake passport. They brought him back to Los Angeles in handcuffs. The preliminary hearing was 3 weeks later. I sat in the courtroom gallery with Rebecca watching as they brought Eric in. He looked smaller, somehow diminished without his charming mask. When he saw me, his face twisted with hatred. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Diana Reeves, presented the case methodically. Julia's testimony about the abuse, the photographs of her injuries. My journal entered into evidence as a contemporaneous record of Eric's pattern of behavior. Thomas Wright's investigation showing 3 previous suspicious deaths. Most damning, the laptop found in Eric's apartment showing his research into poisoning me. The syringe found on his counter containing potassium chloride, a substance that causes heart attacks and is difficult to detect in autopsies. Your Honor, Diana said Eric Thornton is a serial predator who has refined his technique over 20 years. He targets wealthy women through their daughters. He isolates, controls, and ultimately plans to murder these women to access their money. Sarah Mitchell was to be his 4th victim. We're asking that he be held without bail as a danger to the community and a flight risk. Eric's lawyer, a tired-looking public defender, argued weakly for bail, but the judge had read my journal, all 531 pages. Mr. Thornton, the judge said, I've reviewed Mrs. Mitchell's documentation. It is one of the most chilling accounts of predatory behavior I've encountered in 30 years on the bench. Combined with the evidence of your plans to murder Mrs. Mitchell, I find you to be in extreme danger. Bail is denied. You will be held until trial. Eric exploded. This is bullshit. That journal is fake. Sarah Mitchell is a crazy old woman who couldn't accept her daughter's happiness. She made all of this up. Mr. Thornton. The judge's voice was ice. Mrs. Mitchell's journal includes photographs with timestamps, medical records, financial documents, and testimony from multiple witnesses. It's the opposite of crazy. It's methodical documentation that saved her life and her daughter's life. They led Eric away, still screaming. I felt Rebecca's hand on my shoulder. It's over, Sarah. You won. The trial took place 4 months later in October 2022. Eric's public defender had been replaced by a slick criminal attorney named William Bradley, hired by Eric's family. He tried every tactic to discredit me, Julia, and my documentation. Mrs. Mitchell, Bradley said during cross-examination, isn't it true that you disapproved of your daughter's marriage from the moment you met Mr. Thornton? I had concerns, yes. And isn't it true that you hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on my client? I hired an investigator to verify my suspicions that Mr. Thornton was dangerous. Suspicions based on what your intuition, your prejudice against a man you barely knew, based on his behavior, his questioning about my assets, his isolation of my daughter, his pattern of abuse. Alleged abuse. Mrs. Thornton stayed with my client for nearly 2 years. If he was so terrible, why didn't she leave? Diana Reeves objected. Your Honor, defense counsel is victim blaming. Sustained. Mr. Bradley rephrase, but the damage was done. Bradley was trying to paint me as a controlling, interfering mother who had fabricated evidence to destroy my daughter's marriage. Until Diana put Julia on the stand. Julia had gained back some weight. She looked healthier, stronger. She wore a simple blue dress and no makeup to cover the faint scars from that last night. Mrs. Thornton, Diana said gently, can you tell the jury about your relationship with Eric Thornton? For 3 hours, Julia testified. She described the isolation, the financial control, the escalating violence. She described how Eric had taught her to see her mother's concern as manipulation, how he'd prepared her to defend him against any criticism. He told me my mother was jealous, Julia said, her voice steady, that she couldn't stand to see me independent. And I believed him, because that's what abuse does. It makes you doubt everyone who actually loves you. Bradley tried to shake her on cross-examination, but Julia had spent 4 months in therapy learning to recognize manipulation. She didn't waver. Mr. Bradley, she said at one point, you're using the same tactics Eric used, twisting my words, making me doubt my own experience. I know what that feels like now, and I'm not falling for it again. The turning point came when Diana presented Thomas Wright's investigation. 3 previous women, Patricia Morrison, Abigail Dorothy Singh, all dead under suspicious circumstances, all within a year of Eric entering their daughters' lives. The prosecutor from Colorado testified via video link about Patricia Morrison's accidental fall. At the time, we couldn't prove foul play, but Eric Thornton, was the sole beneficiary of insurance money that should have gone to Patricia's daughter. The daughter was found mentally incompetent to manage her affairs shortly after her mother's death. The pattern was undeniable. Finally, Diana presented my journal. She read key passages aloud, showing the jury how I'd documented Eric's behavior from the very first dinner, how I'd predicted his escalation, how everything I'd feared had come true. "Ladies and gentlemen," Diana said in her closing argument, "Sarah Mitchell did something remarkable. She couldn't save her daughter through force. Julia wasn't ready to be saved. So she did the next best thing. She documented everything. She built a fortress of evidence. And when Eric Thornton finally made his move when he prepared to murder Sarah and destroy Julia, that evidence was ready." The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts: attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, domestic violence, assault and battery, financial elder abuse. Eric Thornton was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. 1 year later, I stood in the storage unit with Julia. We were finally closing it out, moving the contents to our respective homes. "Mom," Julia said, holding my journal, "can I keep this?" "Why would you want to?" "Because it saved my life. Because it's proof that even when I pushed you away, even when I said terrible things, you never stopped loving me. You just loved me differently, with patience and preparation." We spent the afternoon sorting through Robert's belongings, the trust documents, the evidence that had convicted Eric. Julia found the letter Robert had written before he died, the one where he'd predicted this exact situation. "Dad knew," she said softly. "He knew I'd be vulnerable. He knew the world had dangerous people in it, and he made sure you'd be protected." Julia had moved back home with me after Eric's arrest. She'd started therapy, returned to work, reconnected with old friends. The recovery was slow but real. "Mom, I met someone," she said suddenly. My heart clenched. "Oh, his name is David. He's a teacher. Very gentle, very patient. He knows everything that happened with Eric." She looked at me nervously. "Would you want to meet him?" "Of course. But Julia, take your time. There's no rush." "I know. That's what makes David different. He's not pushing for anything. He's just there. Being kind." I smiled. "That sounds perfect." We locked the storage unit for the last time. As we drove away, Julia said, "Mom, I want to do something with your journal. Something that helps other people." "Like what?" "I want to publish it, with your permission. Not for money. Donate all proceeds to domestic violence shelters. But so that other mothers know what to look for. So other daughters know they're not crazy when someone tells them their boyfriend is dangerous." I thought about it. "Okay, but on one condition." "What-o?" "We add an epilogue about recovery, about how you're rebuilding your life, because the story shouldn't end with Eric going to prison. It should end with you being free." 6 months later, The Mother's Vault: How Documentation Saved My Daughter's Life was published. It became required reading in domestic violence training programs across the country. I received letters from women thanking me, from mothers who recognized the patterns I'd described, from daughters who realized they were being isolated and controlled. The book's dedication read, "For Robert who knew, for Julia who survived, for Rebecca who understood, and for every mother watching her daughter make a terrible mistake, knowing she can't stop it, only prepare for it." 2 years after Eric's conviction, Julia and David got married in my garden. Small ceremony, 20 guests. Rebecca was there. Detective Kingston came. Stephen Garrett officiated. Julia wore a simple white dress she'd chosen herself. No one approved it via text. No one controlled what she ate at the reception. No one monitored who she talked to. When I gave my toast, I kept it simple. To Julia and David, may your marriage be built on respect, honesty, and the freedom to be yourself. That night, alone in my house, I opened my desk drawer. The leather journal sat there, all 531 pages, copied and preserved in multiple locations. I ran my hand over the worn cover. "We did it, Robert," I whispered. "Our girl is safe. She's happy. She's free." I placed the journal back in the drawer, closed it, and went to bed. For the first time in 3 years, I slept through the night.